Iran appears in the Bible from Genesis to the prophecies of the end times, but under its ancient name, Persia. Because the Bible doesn't just tell us about Iran's beginning, it also foretells its ultimate destiny in one of the darkest and most feared passages in Revelation, the war of Gog and Magog, a coalition that will rise up against Israel in the last days. But before becoming a prophetic enemy, Persia was God's chosen empire to free his people, rebuild the temple, and fulfill Daniel's prophecies. Stay with me until the end, because today you're about to discover what very few dare to reveal: Iran's true role in God's greater plan, from the beginning until the end. Let's dive in. It all starts in the book of Genesis. After the flood, God gives humanity a fresh start and reveals how the nation of Persia was born. Noah and his family were the only survivors left on earth, and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the forefathers of new nations. In chapter 10 we find the very first map of the world's nations, where we read, "This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. From these, the coastlands were populated, each according to their own languages, families, and nations." This genealogy forms a map showing the lineage of Noah's sons. Here, we discover 2 patriarchs who would later give rise to the Persian Empire, Madai and Elam. Madai was Japheth's son, and from him arose the Medes, a people who settled in the northern mountains, a region now part of modern-day Iran. From these northern mountains of Iran, Madai's descendants gradually expanded, establishing villages, clans, and tribes. They were independent, rugged mountaineers, known for their toughness and strong tribal organization. Madai is the direct ancestor of the ancient northern heartland of Iran. The second name is Elam, son of Shem. His descendants, the Elamites, settled in southwestern Iran, in fertile lands near the Persian Gulf. But Genesis 14 tells of the Bible's first great international war. 4 eastern kings, including Chedorlaomer, king of the Elamites, joined forces and invaded Canaan. They plundered cities, enslaved peoples, and took Lot, Abraham's nephew, captive. Elam wasn't some small, insignificant tribe. It was a powerful nation, and according to Scripture, the first nation to attack God's people of faith. But Abraham didn't just stand by and watch. With only 318 trained servants, he pursued the invaders, attacked them by night, and defeated them. He rescued Lot, freed the captives, and humiliated the eastern kings. It was an impossible victory, a triumph that defied human logic and delivered a powerful message. No eastern power can prevail against those who have the favor of God. But the people of Elam didn't disappear. Centuries passed, generations were born and died, and those tribes once defeated by Abraham grew in number. The Elamites and the Medes shared the same land, the ancient terrain of eastern Mesopotamia. One dwelled southwest, in the fertile plains of Elam. The other inhabited the mountainous north, where the harshness of the region forged the character of the Medes. As empires rose and fell quietly, another power was taking form. First clans emerged, then kingdoms, and finally an empire, the Persian Empire. Though they were pagan nations, they were never outside God's plan. Through the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, 2 great prophecies concerning them were declared. The first prophecy, spoken through Isaiah, revealed that God would use Elam and Media as instruments to punish Babylon. Babylon, who had destroyed Jerusalem and burned down its temple, would not escape judgment. God had already decided who would bring about its downfall: the United Peoples of Iran. Yet the second prophecy was even more astounding. God would not only use Persia to bring punishment, he would also wield Persia as an instrument of liberation. God announced through the prophet Isaiah that a pagan Persian king, yet unborn, would serve as his chosen agent to free Israel from exile and decree the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Isaiah called him by name more than 150 years before he was even born. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus: and both prophecies came true with terrifying precision. In the 8th century BC, Deioces, king of the Medes, united the tribes of Elam and Madai, founding the first imperial capital on Iranian soil, Ecbatana. His grandson, Cyaxares, took the next great step, reforming the army and turning it into a war machine strong enough to destroy Nineveh, capital of the Assyrian Empire, one of Israel's most brutal enemies. The prophecy began to be fulfilled. God was raising up Persia from within as his instrument of judgment and redemption. Yet, even as Persia grew in power, God had already revealed its destiny through prophetic dreams, and the first to see it clearly was a young Hebrew prisoner living in Babylon, Daniel. It all started when the Babylonian army, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, marched into Jerusalem. The city walls fell, the temple was ransacked, and thousands were carried away into slavery in distant lands. Daniel was among them. He was just a teenager when he was torn from his home and brought to the court of Babylon, the most powerful empire in the world at that moment. But there, in the darkness, God chose him. Surrounded by the corrupt splendor of the royal palace, Daniel kept himself untainted. And because of his faithfulness, God gave him something granted to no other captive, a gift of visions. Visions that spoke not only about his own time, but about the course of all human history. At the very heart of the empire responsible for Jerusalem's destruction, Daniel began to see how God would raise another kingdom, one destined to replace Babylon and play a crucial role in the fate of his own people, the Persian Empire. And it all began with dreams. While Daniel served in Nebuchadnezzar's court, the king was deeply troubled by a disturbing dream. A giant statue, crafted from different metals, towered before him, radiating an indescribable glory and menace. Terrified, the king demanded not only someone who could interpret this dream, but who could reveal it without first hearing it. None of Babylon's wise men could accomplish this task, but God's prophet was ready, and they brought Daniel before the king. With the authority of heaven itself, Daniel stood before the most powerful ruler on earth, and revealed what no Babylonian wise man could unravel. He described the dream exactly and proclaimed a revelation that would forever change the world's destiny. You, O king, are the head of gold, but after you, another kingdom will rise, one inferior to yours, depicted by the chest and arms of silver. That figure of silver wasn't just one nation, but two arms, two mighty forces bound together in one body, the Medes and the Persians, united yet unequal, because the Persian arm would rise stronger and take control. The prophecy was clear. Babylon would fall, and the throne would pass on to a new empire chosen by God himself. Young Daniel, living far from his homeland, watched God's visions come true. Soon his vision would become reality, because the King God had foretold long ago through Isaiah was about to arise from the highlands of Persia. His name was Cyrus. Cyrus, the young Persian king, conquered Media, united the kingdoms into the Medo-Persian Empire, and steadily grew to become the greatest power of his time, finally turning his gaze upon Babylon. The prophesied day came, yet it wasn't a battle like any other. One night, King Belshazzar, grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, hosted a banquet with 1,000 nobles, and amidst the frenzy, committed an unforgivable act. He ordered the sacred vessels his grandfather had looted from the temple in Jerusalem brought out, and they toasted with them in honor of false gods. Suddenly, an invisible hand appeared, writing 4 words onto the palace wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The king turned pale. No one understood the meaning of these words until they summoned Daniel, who revealed their terrifying message. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Even as these words were uttered, the prophecy began to unfold. The armies of Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, had diverted the Euphrates River and were quietly entering the city along the dry riverbed. The gates of Babylon stood unlocked. God himself had thrown them open. That very night, King Belshazzar was slain, and the prophecy was fulfilled. Babylon fell into Persian hands. The Jews, who for 70 years had wept by the rivers of Babylon, now witnessed an impossible dream come true. A foreign pagan king decreed that they could return home to Jerusalem. But Cyrus did more than permit their return. He financed the rebuilding of the temple and sent the Jewish leaders back with royal support. Zerubbabel, descendant of David's royal line, and Joshua, the high priest. These men would lay down the first foundations, finally restoring the place where God's name dwelled. Thus, Persia became the one nation not to destroy Israel, but to rebuild it. But to Daniel, God unveiled another, even more frightening vision about Persia. In this vision, from the chaotic waters arose 4 monstrous beasts. The second beast looked like a massive bear, raised up on one side with 3 ribs clutched between its teeth, and a voice thundered from heaven, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." The bear symbolized the empire destined to follow Babylon, Media and Persia. Yet the beast leaned to one side because Persia would ultimately dominate Media, and the 3 ribs represented its greatest conquests. Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt each devoured one after another in Persia's relentless march of expansion. This vision was fulfilled with chilling accuracy, for after conquering the kingdom of Lydia in Asia Minor and Babylon itself, Persia did not slow down. It set its sights on Egypt. Under Cambyses II, son of Cyrus, Persian armies marched across the Sinai Desert and smashed Pharaoh Psamtik III in the Battle of Pelusium. Egypt, Israel's ancient oppressor, fell before the Persian Empire, and thus the third rib was torn from its place. But these visions weren't finished yet. Years later, standing on the banks of the Ulai River, Daniel was seized once again by a vision, one far more precise, clearer, and even more terrifying. Before his eyes appeared a ram with 2 horns, but one horn stood taller than the other, and the taller horn had grown up later. The ram charged fiercely toward the west, toward the north, and toward the south, and none could oppose him. Then a voice explained the meaning. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. Again, Persia takes center stage in the divine plan, though this time not as an ally, but as a mighty empire, conquering without resistance and charging forth like an unleashed beast. And one chilling detail stands out clearly. One horn stood taller, an unmistakable hint at Persia's dominance over Media. 2 peoples, 1 empire, but only one dominant throne. As the vision continued, suddenly from the west, a goat appeared, swift as the wind, with a single prominent horn right between his eyes. In a flash, he charged the ram, knocking him down and trampling him underfoot. It was the prophecy of the next empire. Greece, under Alexander the Great, would overthrow Persia with supernatural speed. At that moment, Daniel didn't yet know who the goat represented, but he understood clearly that Persia, the greatest, most glorious empire the world had yet seen, would one day fall. But that ending had not yet come, for in its days of splendor, Persia was not only invincible, it was the center of the world. Its reign stretched from India to Ethiopia, and in the days of King Ahasuerus, the throne of the greatest empire on earth was established in the majestic city of Susa, in the heart of Elam, what we now call southwestern Iran. And it was precisely in Susa that one of the Bible's most unexpected miracles happened. The great empire would be conquered by a single woman. King Ahasuerus held a magnificent banquet that lasted for 6 months, then invited all the people of Susa to a final grand celebration lasting 7 days. In a moment of pride and excess, he ordered Queen Vashti, his wife, to be brought before them to display her beauty. But Vashti refused. Humiliated before his entire empire, the king banished her. Then his advisors suggested a radical solution, searching throughout the kingdom for a new queen from among the young virgins. The most beautiful would be taken to the palace, where they would undergo a full year of preparation before being presented to the king. One of those young women was Hadassah, though no one knew her by that name. An orphan, born among the exiled Jews, she had been secretly raised by her cousin Mordecai. And in the palace, she was given a new name, Esther. Esther captured the king's favor, and without knowing she was a Jew, Ahasuerus crowned her queen of Persia. Meanwhile, hidden in the shadows of the palace, a deadly enemy emerged. Haman, a descendant of the Amalekites, ancient enemies of Israel. Haman had risen to the highest position next to the king, and when everyone was ordered to kneel before him, Mordecai, Esther's cousin,